number. Max, it's been another week. Realignment, of course, Matthew Sluka. I mean, just name it, it's there. What was your reaction? And I saw a lot of ESPN, you guys were reporting the heck out of this Sluka story with UNLV and where you kind of stand on this.
Yeah, just fascinating to see this play out. And, I think you hear stories like this all the time. I think in my coverage of, the portal and kind of player movement, stuff like that, you hear lots of stories of, oh, yeah, this guy went to this school and he did not get what he thought he was getting. And, you just still don't see, other than, obviously the Jaden Rashada lawsuit, like you just don't really see these stories kind of break through. And, players are usually very reluctant to come out and say, yeah, I feel like I kind of got screwed over on that deal. And so, Matthew Sluka and his family, deciding to take a stand here and say, we were verbally promised $100,000 and all we've got is $3,000 and we just can't do it. I think it was fascinating to see that one really go mainstream and see everybody make a big deal of it. And I think that anybody facing that kind of predicament in their work life would make probably that decision of, we're very far apart here on my expectations versus reality here. But, I think it does, lead to like a lot of conversations around just how messy NIL is. And just, you hear stories of players going and asking collectives for more money all the time. You hear stories of players not getting enough. You obviously hear lots of tampering stories, but like, this is one that, I think very interested to see kind of when the dust settles, who was right on this one, but it certainly seemed like, I'm sure they wish they got something in writing and never could. And it didn't seem like UNLV had any capability of upholding that kind of a promise. And, now an undefeated team has got to, move forward with a new quarterback.
Max, what do you think Sluka's NIL value or transfer value and what his market will be come December?
Yeah, it's a good question because, he cannot go into the portal until December 9th when it opens, even though he'd be a grad transfer. People will know that he's out there. I'm sure he probably will be looking at Group of 5 schools again, unless he's looking to, go back to Holy Cross or go back to the FCS level. I think that you're already seeing people kind of speculating on some big names that could be in the portal here in December at the quarterback position. But ultimately, like, I think this off season we saw, I think 60% of FBS teams end up going with the transfer for starting quarterback. So, there will be lots of teams hunting for one, including at the Group of 5 level. I think that he probably didn't get to put enough on tape as a passer at UNLV. He's got a ton of tape at Holy Cross that he can throw the ball. But, certainly more running than passing at UNLV. Interested to see kind of what the opportunities are. And look, I think it's unfair to the kid in some ways, but I think he's going to have to answer to coaches about, man, you left a 3-0 team. Like, I think the coach is going to have to feel good about this is a guy that's going to be bought into to our team and stick with us.
I didn't imagine we'd have all of this transfer portal news here in week 5, but I guess with the redshirt rule and all that, it's about when it's all going to start up. And there was the other story, Max, out there about Bear Alexander and USC. Yeah. I know Lincoln Riley had some comments and was basically telling the media there's nothing to anything, and then he's in the portal or plans to be in the portal. What's your understanding of what's going on there?
This is a player who transferred a ton in high school and went to Georgia and transferred after 1 year. Extremely talented defensive lineman and those guys are worth a lot of money. And, Bear Alexander, from what I understand, was making a lot of money at USC and had a great setup. But I think that, now that he's in year 3 and he's trying to get to the NFL, I think there's clearly a frustration on the part of his parental figure about, him playing 20 snaps a game and not 35 to 40 snaps a game. And, I think Lincoln Riley, he made the point of like, look, it should be hard to play defensive line at USC. Last year, a guy like Bear Alexander has to play a ton because they just didn't have very good talent or depth there. I think they have gotten better on the D line, and probably a player like him, probably, do you have the endurance and the stamina to go 40 plays? It just kind of depends on what kind of shape you're in and if you're playing your best football and stuff. But, I think that's been a frustrating deal. There was rumors in the spring that Bear Alexander was going to go in the portal and, he renegotiated with their collective to stay. So, I think it's been a little bit of a roller coaster deal for USC. And, a talent like that, you can sort of lay out those red flags, but, at his size and with some of his skill, he's still going to have a lot of schools fighting over him in December if he does go in the portal.
So one of the things that I saw a couple of comments about the Sluka story at UNLV, to go back to that again, is that there are no guardrails. And I remember this show, maybe even me, I think all of us at some point mentioned guardrails. And initially the reaction from fans, audience, was, you guys are get off my lawn. But guardrails are not just to perhaps protect the college programs or the game. It's also something you need to protect the player, correct?
Yeah, and I want to be clear about this because it doesn't get talked about enough. Like the fact that Matthew Sluka and his representation did not get a deal that would pay him $100,000 in writing with UNLV, it doesn't mean that none of these guys are signing contracts. Like these guys are signing agreements with schools and with collectives. I should be clear, with the collectives to get paid on regular installments and stuff like that. So we have some structure to this. And, certainly when you don't have that stuff, then it's going to get messier. And, in the case of the Rashada lawsuit, like they put all that on paper. And so he is suing to get some of that money back. So you have some of that. And I think that, obviously when next year as this is setting up, you go to revenue sharing, it's a bit more straightforward, the student athlete and their representation dealing directly with the school. But I'm sure the frustration for people is like, well, you can't just, quit your team in September. And that's why the portal is not open right now and not open to grad transfers at all times and stuff like that. But, these stories are still going to happen. If it's not a player who said that they didn't pay what they said, there's going to be a player who said we're worth more now than we thought we were a month ago. I think that's just the nature of the open market there. And, how much can you create guardrails that like prevent these things from happening ever? Like, I don't know how possible that's going to be.
Max, Georgia and Alabama play this week in all too rare on the field action in college football. What do you think about Kalen DeBoer's early go? And how frustrated are other SEC fans thinking that they were going to get a reprieve from Bama being good when Saban retired?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly we're not seeing a lot of signs here. I know there was a little period there where it's like, oh man, Auburn's doing really well in recruiting, and what does that say and stuff like that. But like, man, you can't point to a lot of things from year one in Alabama to suggest that Kalen DeBoer cannot handle being the successor to Nick Saban. It's been pretty impressive to see what they've done in taking the team they got there, and it's what I expected. When you have a guy that has coached at the different levels he's coached at. These are much more talented players than you had at Fresno State, right? So like you're probably going to figure out a way to move the ball at them and to get stops with them on defense, stuff like that. I think you put together a great staff, and I think the world's very interested to see, is he ready for this kind of test of facing Kirby Smart? And I think this Georgia team obviously looks loaded on paper, but Kentucky was able to play a certain way that allowed that game to go for 4 quarters, and so. Can Alabama land a couple punches early and gain some confidence that that they can go toe to toe with this Georgia team that everyone is expecting to be a national championship favorite, and so I can't wait for that one. I think that I think Kalen DeBoer is going to, just as we saw when Washington played those big games with Oregon last year. I'm excited to see what Kalen DeBoer has got in his bag.
Max, we had a successful trip to Lincoln. Unfortunately, they didn't get the memo to win the game. I don't know. I guess they just got mixed up in all the communication. But in all seriousness, Dylan Raiola he's a real talent, as we all knew, and that is quite the fun trip to be able to make. I'm envious of Huskers fans that get to experience that more often than once in a lifetime.
Man, what did you think of a night game there?
It was awesome. The whole atmosphere was incredible. Obviously, the 400 sellout, to be a part of that unintentionally was pretty cool. Had a runza. We all did. Mm-hmm. And try to check all the boxes. But, yeah, it was amazing, man. It was amazing, and definitely a once-in-a-lifetime type experience.
Man, I'm sorry I missed you guys. I had to end up having to go down to Austin to cover the Arch Manning Fest of his first start, and just crazy timing of how that went. But I'm glad that you got a nice little sample of Lincoln, Nebraska when the football team is pretty decent. I'm interested to see they got Purdue on the road this week. Interested to see can they kind of string together a couple good games here and get back kind of in that conversation. But yeah, it's Royola's he's the real deal. I mean, it's easy when you have those 5-star recruits to expect way too much way too soon, but that kid seems ready for it.
When we were on the sideline that was set up for us by Dr. Elza and also Coach Rule, we were right behind his father and his brother, who is a 4-star quarterback who committed, I think, maybe a couple of days ago. And I think his mom was there as well. And it was really cool to kind of watch them as, like, not the godfather of the recruiting pipeline, but they kind of know what they're doing there. But I got to tell you, Max, I've been to games. Craig's been to games. We've seen Nebraska play elsewhere. But this was, I'm so glad I finally, it just worked. And it was experience with Craig and Jennifer and Daniel. And the night game, how many times have you been to a game there? Like 50?
When I was a kid, we didn't get to go to a ton. And then when I was in college, freshman year, you get student tickets and you go as a student, and that was really cool. And then really from sophomore year on, it was, covering the games as a student journalist for the paper, for the Omaha paper or whatever. So, man, I don't know. My total is not as high as you would think, but I got to say that, I got to cover that Colorado game a couple of weeks ago, and you got a pretty similar experience in terms of the Friday night deal. Like, man, they do it up for a night game, man.
Yeah.
It's that end of the third quarter light show they put on with the drones and all that stuff. That thing is that gaming experience has evolved in the past few years in a pretty impressive way.
Yeah, they've kind of hipped up the place a little bit.
Do you think they'll get their wish of no more Friday games?
That's a weird political thing where it's like somehow it's okay if Ohio State and Penn State and those guys say never, so then everybody else just has to do it. And I don't think that the folks around the leadership here, Troy Dannon and down, I don't think they were thrilled with drawing that one. And I think. Do you guys buy that though? Like, I don't know. Does it really, like, I understand the argument is like, well, that's not like, that's tough for high school football attendance and stuff like that. As long as it's not annual, I don't see it as like a huge problem. I'm sure that crowd was still pretty full.
Well,
but
if Nebraska can handle it, I don't understand why nobody else similar to them can. I think that's BS, and I think that's just them throwing their weight around, because that is very wild for the big schools to just say, like, nope, we don't want to do it. Everybody else has to do it, and everybody else just has to put up with it, I guess. And I just don't see how that's not going to be a fight again in the future.
I'm with you. If it happens on occasion, if it's randomized and sort of how they do that, then you can live with it. Nobody wants to do that every year, but yeah, there certainly seems to be. Hey, well, we can't ask these guys to do it, so we're going to ask you guys to do it.
Well, Max, if you look at the Friday night schedule for the Big Ten, there are 3 huge omissions to it this year. Like USC's on it twice, Washington's on it twice. The new schools are the new, like, even like Nebraska's on it once because of they're still new by Big Ten standards, I guess.
You know what you have to be?
Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan.
Go win.
They're not on it.
Go beat those teams. Go beat them. Go win. Doesn't matter if you have 100,000 or not. Maybe you could start making your own decisions.
Yeah, I mean, we got Virginia Tech Miami on Friday, which is a pretty big ACC game. Like, I think around the country, everybody understands, like, this is not beneath us. Like, it's certainly for the old Pac-12 and now for the Big 12. Like, you kind of understand it's part of the brand building, I think, to have that spotlight. So yeah, I'm with you. It seems like a thing that everybody's just got to put up with.
Yeah, you got to fight to get your exposure where you can, especially on those big networks now. And so, yeah, I think it's worked out. Like, the Texas State-Arizona State game was freaking awesome. Like, there's been some cool matchups on those weeknight games. But should ask you, you went down to Austin for the Arch Manning experience. Did he walk on water at any point while you were down there? Or just, like, what was that like to see just sort of the buzz around this young man and the buzz around Texas right now, for that matter?
Now, first of all, what was the buzz around the Runza?
I liked it. I liked it, and I'm more of a picky eater, but it was like a really fancy, thinner Hot Pocket, but delicious. Yeah.
Daniel, Jennifer's husband, went and got one, and I think maybe got 2, and then he offered me to have a bite of it, and it was, I didn't know what to expect. I loved the combination of the meat. I was wondering about that. Then Craig and I got one. I loved it. It was perfect. It was a warm night, but I thought the taste was really good.
Oh, they play. We took my son to the spring game this year, which was the first for us. It was really cool, and we got runs there, and it was the best runs I'd ever had. So whatever they're doing to cook them over at the stadium, they got it figured out. But to answer your question about Arch Manning, and you saw today Steve Sarkisian said they're going to wait and decide tomorrow on who's starting against Mississippi State between Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. I would guess it'll be Arch Manning, but I suppose we'll see what they decide to do. They have a bye week after that before they play Oklahoma. But, I thought it was a good, talking to Texas fans around the stadium before the game, there seemed to be a pretty good understanding of man, you saw a lot of people wearing number 16 jerseys and were fired up to get a kind of a full game from Arch and what can he do. But I think everybody around there kind of understood Quinn's our quarterback. And I think that they're kind of taking their cues from the head coach there, that everyone does, kind of believe Quinn Ewers has a chance to chase a Heisman and a lot of big things this year. And, I think that the way the game played out probably reinforced that a little bit. Arch Manning did some good things and, also made some redshirt freshman type mistakes, and I think that that's just part of the growing process. It didn't seem like he got too down on himself necessarily. And obviously you're playing an opponent where, the game's not in jeopardy or anything like that. So I think it was good reps for him. And, I think nowadays you got to feel like if Texas had to, turn to Malik Murphy last year for some big games to stay in the Big 12 race. You got to be able to trust that you can plug that guy in if you need a couple starts during this SEC run. And so I think there's a lot of value there, but certainly Quinn Ewers is the guy. And I think they're expecting huge things from him as soon as he's back.
Not surprised he has the arm talent. Obviously, he's a much better runner than anybody, including his father, who was, as Paul, you mentioned, a wide receiver. But Eli and Peyton couldn't run out of their own shadow. But I saw a play in which he got sacked by UL Monroe, but it took about 4 guys to hit him. I mean, he's a big, strong. He is really turned into a hell of an athlete.
Yeah, he's got a good pocket presence about him, and I'm sure people would be like, "Well, yeah, duh, of course he does." But I think that it's you can see a player that is trying to work through his progressions and really, be a really professional quarterback. And I think it's just you probably get faster and better decision making with Quinn Ewers, just from his experience of starting 25 games at Texas. But I think Arch Manning, the arm talent, and I think he certainly seems very well liked by this team and a guy that. They didn't run him against ULM, but certainly flashing that against UTSA with the run that he had is a different dynamic, even if Stark doesn't like to do that in his offense. So, yeah, it's a pretty good situation to have that guy as your QB2, and for that guy to also be fine with kind of the succession plan there and being the guy next to him.
Max, thank you very much. Max Olson, theathletic.com, now with ESPN, and as Sam Kahn said, they don't talk anymore.